Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Is all that's missing to make the new starting lineup work just a little practice? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcast. It's always free, never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out and with over 22,000 subscribers and talk about the starting lineup, because that's what a lot of people are doing these days, and talk about Darvin Ham and his decision making, because people are doing that there as well. We'd love to use the comments. We'd love to use your questions on the show, so please make sure you are sending them. Want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. One of the big Twitter things on NBA social media has been a conversation about whether or not the Lakers botched their draft over the summer, based on the performance of one rookie in particular, but I actually think the conversation should be extended to two of them. So we'll get to that before the end of the show. We'll talk about tonight's game against Charlotte, which really, guys, do not screw this up. But let's start with Andy with a little bit of practice, because the Lakers finally had one. And there was at least some optimism expressed in the coaching staff and among players that this new starting lineup, which has gotten off to a rocky start with Jared Vanderbilt and Cam Reddish in the lineup and D'Lo to the bench. But a little practice, Andy, might help iron out some of the rough edges.
Yeah, you heard after practice today, Jared Vanderbilt talking about just the benefit of being out there and actually being able to work in a practice setting with that lineup, as opposed to everything being, a dress rehearsal in real time, right, which is a difficult way to implement it. Especially for somebody like Jared Vanderbilt, who I think is still to some degree working his way into game shape anyway. And he said that, quote, now that we're able to start putting in some sets and build some chemistry with that lineup with a couple practices, I think it will only get better starting today with a good practice. I think going back to the in-season tournament and our traveling and stuff, we haven't had many practices. So this was a much needed, efficient practice that kind of brings us together. And he also mentioned how one of the benefits of having a practice, just when things are getting off track, you just have a setting to try to, take a beat, figure out exactly what's going wrong, and you can have a little bit more patience. You can have a little bit more repetition and things like that. I also thought Darvin, he had an interesting assessment when asked during today's practice about the pros and cons of the new lineup. And he said, quote, I think the pros are the size, the athleticism, the ability to switch across the board. I think the cons are just different actions. Not having a traditional point guard can be challenging at times. But at the end of the day, again, we have our stuff in our package where we can still get to really good stuff. Get Bron some really good looks, get Anthony Davis some really good looks, Taurean, Cam, and Vando being able to slash and be effective at the rim. I think it's more good than bad. And this also, too, Vanderbilt also talked about how the practices can hopefully help guys, basically him, Prince, and Reddish, being able to just react quicker to everything they're expected to do, I think on both sides of the ball, but in particular offensively. Just the idea that when the ball comes to them, they will do whatever they are supposed to do faster and not have to think about it at all.
And, that relates to a quote that came after the Boston game where Darvin was talking about those guys, and he said, if they're trying to play off, the defense playing off of them, Cam's got to step up shooting with confidence or eat up that space on the drive, collapse the defense once he touches the paint and try to find the open man. Same thing for Vando. The ball hits him. You just can't hold it and be confused. You got to move on to the next thing, whether that's a pitch ahead and hit to its teammates, or shot goes off, go hunt down the offensive rebound, get us some extra possessions. And, basically let's play fast. Let's play with some rhythm and all that kind of stuff. And okay, that's fine. But like to me, all of this stuff put together gets to one of the big questions, to put it charitably, around this lineup, which is, good teams take role players. Good teams take role players and they put them in positions where they are most likely to succeed. And what I found really disturbing, particularly about that quote, after the Boston game that I just read, but then even some of this other stuff, that Darvin's talking about in practice on Wednesday, is you're asking Vanderbilt and Reddish to be, I think, more than they really are offensively. You're taking them out of the lane where they are most likely to succeed and putting them in one where their skill sets don't play as well. And as a defense, Cam Reddish, go shoot with as much confidence as you want. Every shot, Cam Reddish, if we can get Cam Reddish to take 6-7 shots, 8 shots, 9, whatever it is, those are shots that Anthony Davis and LeBron James and probably, Taurean Prince, I think, to some degree, those guys aren't taking. If we can get Jared Vanderbilt to be out in the perimeter taking 3-pointers, or trying to create and drive and finish around the rim, which is just not something he's ever really been that good at, we are winning. Like, those are our opportunities for better players to do things. And then if one of the things that's very clear about you go watch the Boston game, the amount of block shots or heavily contested shots, like, there's a big crowd at the rim. So if you want Vanderbilt to go finish there, or Cam to drive hard and finish, like he's doing, they are going to be doing these things under much more difficult circumstances than they otherwise would be. And so when I take all of this stuff collectively, my big issue with it is, who are you asking to do this stuff? Like, these aren't the right guys for that. And ultimately, even if it sort of results in those things, a clean shot for Cam Reddish, that is a victory for the opposition, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, there is some truth to that. The flip side of that argument is you are just as easily putting D'Angelo Russell in a position before of having to defend, or Austin Reeves before in a position of having to defend, where, frankly, they were often getting abused. And it was hurting the team just as much defensively as whatever ways Reddish or Vando may hurt the team offensively. And the proof was in the results, in the data, in the eye test, which, by the way, is not me saying that this new look is the obvious answer to land on. We've talked about this, Brian. I have, I think, more cautious optimism, if nothing else, towards it, because I've wanted to see them go in this type of direction, if not necessarily this extreme, for a while. So, and I do think that for this to work, you do have to give it a larger sample size, and opening it up against OKC and Boston, that's just tough no matter how you're going to play.
Doesn't matter what change you're trying to do. It doesn't matter what, especially.
It doesn't matter if you're trying to run everything you always do. It's
right.
tough to do it against those teams.
And when you start to do it with guys who are not familiar with playing together all the time, I understand all the mitigating things. And
the idea, though,
game against Charlotte, that could be a day to sort of get a chance to do things against the lesser opponent, that you get a little success, you start to see what it's supposed to look like, and then over the weekend when you go back to New Orleans and Minnesota, maybe you can execute a little bit better.
Yeah, and look, I think also too, the idea is the defensive upgrade will give them more opportunities to get out and transition through disruptiveness, which will leave the lane less clogged for everybody driving towards it. And also, too, give them their best offense, period, because we've seen it doesn't always matter who is out there. They still are not a great team. Look, don't get me wrong. I would like to see them run more things that look like sets on a regular basis, as opposed to
they do
YOLO making it up as they go.
They do more of that, if anything, than people give credit. It just doesn't always look very good, but they still, they're doing it.
And again, I will say this, part of the elephant in the room, I do think a lot of this has to do specifically with how LeBron has to play over the course of 48 minutes.
Okay, we started to talk about this a little bit for Wednesday's show, and I want to talk a little bit more because the numbers between the first quarter and the third quarter are relatively significant. And so with a better third quarter, still not as good as it should be, but it's much better than the first. And so I want to get into a little bit of why that is, and then potentially what other lineups they could try. Like if this ain't it, what else is there? So we'll do all of it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by eBay Motors, and Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to bring you the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Dante Exum of the Dallas Mavericks, who the Lakers have seen shoot the lights out at their expense. Jason Kidd said that even when the team is eventually healthy, they're going to keep starting Exum, which, if nothing else, pretty cool story. Plus, Taurean Prince. Laker fans know he is shooting the lights out lately, so try to capitalize on that while you can for your team. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. And same thing with your vehicle. There is nothing worse than having your vehicle break down in real time. I've had my vehicle break down in LA. I've had my vehicle break down in the desert on the way to Las Vegas. Brian was with me. That wasn't fun. And you know what would have come in really handy back then? eBay Motors, because with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running perfectly. They got brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, everything your car needs. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Reminder, the Lakers play the Hornets tonight at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Mitch Kupchak in the house. The Lakers really better win this one. Catch every Lakers game on the hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Lakers.
Okay, so you sent me some numbers because we were talking about it for the show on Wednesday. The difference between the first quarter and the third quarter, and it is
all four quarters.
All four. You sent me all four quarters, but I really want to focus on the first and the third, which, by the way, are the two worst quarters they played in order. Their best quarter is the fourth. Their second best quarter is the second. Their worst is the first. Their second worst is the third. So starting games and coming out of the half are not strengths of this team, which if you are looking for things to criticize, I think the coaching staff, that could be part of it. Your game plan going in, your adjustments coming out of the half. This is also an issue with the players. It is not just the coaches. But so anyway, first quarter, 105.7 offensive rating, 120.6 defensive rating. You are about 15 points in the hole in terms of your net rating with that. Third
For those unaware, those are both atrocious numbers.
Yes. It's hideous. And the net rating is just awful.
If you're not in the whole analytics scene, just to make sure those are terrible. Right.
But this is the first quarter is the only quarter where they are underwater. The third quarter is the closest one. So, the next closest, it's 114 offensive rating. So they're playing much better offensively, and they tighten down defensively. 112 is the defensive rating. So they are plus 2.3 compared to minus 15. One of the things that you pointed out with the Lakers is, and I think is an interesting point, is kind of the way LeBron has to kind of ramp up. There are exceptions. He came out, really aggressively against Chicago, for example. It does happen. But oftentimes he is sort of helping and watching other guys get going offensively, trying to activate them. And has to calibrate his effort defensively throughout a game. I don't think there's any question about that. Is there anything else that you can think of that explains the difference between the first and the third quarters? Because if they could replicate just what they're doing, because again, it was with what should be close to the same lineups. You play, generally speaking, the same rotation in the first quarter as you do the third. There shouldn't be that huge a difference between the first quarter and the third quarter. And to me, the difference, and I don't know what the answer is, but the difference to me seems to be not fully explained just by the LeBron factor that you're talking about, which, by the way, again, I agree is a thing. But I don't know if it's 9 points offense, 8 points the other way on defense, per 100 possessions. I don't know if it's that big a deal. Is it?
I mean, it depends on how you're defining that big of a deal, or
like what else is it? Is that what accounts for the difference between the first and the third quarters?
Well, beyond what I talked about with the pacing yourself defensively, which I think is a thing for LeBron over the course of games, he also takes the fewest amount of shots in the first and the third. So he is also kind of ramping himself up offensively throughout halves as well. And if you are, no matter how much help you want to give LeBron is still a very heliocentric player. I mean, there's always been talk about how the system on any LeBron team is LeBron. And I think that there's some truth to that. And because of that, depending on how much he is or is not directly aggressively involved in the offense, it may at times suffer. And look, some of these numbers have to do with, in the beginning of the year, guys they were missing, Austin Reeves getting off to a terrible start, when he was part of the opening first and third quarters. These are all cumulative. But I mean, for example, during this 2 and 6 period post the IST, if you look up their net ratings for just those 8 games, LeBron has the worst net rating of any starter. We've talked before about the fatigue that he's clearly feeling. This, just to let you know how extreme things have gone, when LeBron is off the court over these past 8 games, the Lakers are 3.5 points better. That's shocking.
That is, and that's way different than the pattern typically has been.
They've typically died without him on the court.
Correct. And so, he does, and just for you mentioned the first quarter and the third quarter, he takes the fewest amount field goal attempts. It is per 100 possessions we're talking here. It is actually, let me go back to per game. It's just easier to read that way. But it's definitely noticeable, but it's not crazy different. What I'm trying to figure out is why, because the first quarter, you're correct, has been a disaster on both sides of the ball. The third quarter has not been. So
I think the game is getting going more, and he's more along the lines of the ramp up. I mean, that's
sure, but does that explain the entire difference between the first and the third quarter?
I mean, it obviously doesn't explain all of it, but I think it is a factor. And
right. I'm trying to think of what the other ones might be, because if you can figure, if there's an answer to that question, then the solution to the first quarter doesn't require the sledgehammer of
here's a big you want another
offense, which is what they're doing.
Fine. You want another big reason. For a long time, Austin Reeves was struggling as part of the first quarter. Then you had a long period where D'Angelo Russell was struggling as part of the first and third quarter. There are a lot of different factors in there. The reason that I bring up LeBron, though, to begin with, is I think LeBron is actually a big rationale for this direction, in particular with Vando and Reddish and the defensive support that they are very clearly going for. Yeah, I'm not bringing this up to try to pit all this on LeBron. What I am saying, though, is I think LeBron is actually a big rationale for why they are doing this, even if you think it is a massive overcorrection.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Because there's something, there's with the same basic rotations and the same guys struggling, and Reeves in the beginning of the year was bad in all the quarters. And all that, the same factors playing through. They are significantly better in the third than the first, and I'm wondering, and I don't know. I mean, leave comments in the YouTube section. Let us if you have ideas as to why it might be playing out this way, I am open to them. I do not have an answer to this question, but the reason I'm
okay. One more reason I would give quickly,
because it is. I feel like if you could diagnose that, it would help guide them to better rotations and one that in a starting lineup that made more sense.
Okay, one more reason I would give quickly before we even get to the idea of what could be a better solution, the lineup we might think would be a better middle ground, whatever. I think this team's personality in general is kind of laid back, and I think that can lead to some laid back starts, probably at the beginning of first and third quarters. Like I think between what is Anthony Davis is playing phenomenal, but he is not a fiery personality. LeBron already talked about these issues with it. I think to some degree, when those are your two leaders, as great of players as they are, I think your team takes a personality from that to some respect.
Is a place where they miss Schroeder, for example,
yes.
It's just that specific type of intent,
or having Vando there all season and healthy, because Vando brings a lot of energy to the court.
All right. Next we want to, we'll get to some of the lineups that we think might, other options here. And then if we can get to it, I'd love to talk about this question of Jalen Hood-Schifino, whether or not the Lakers philosophically really made the wrong decision over the summer with that number 1 draft pick. We'll get to all of it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. And years ago, some friends of mine and I, we went to go see LL Cool J in LA at the now defunct House of Blues, really last minute. We didn't know how to score tickets, so we went to a scalper and the guy took us. They were fake tickets. And we managed through totally unrepeatable luck to get into this show. But after that, I was like, I will never deal with that again. I don't want to deal with that stress. And you shouldn't have to. You don't have to, because Game Time, here's why I love it. They are the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy shows, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop worrying about stuff like scalpers taking you and start getting hyped for the fun. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section or row or less. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Reminder, the Lakers play the Hornets tonight at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Mitch Kupchak in the house. The Lakers really better win this one. Catch every Lakers game on the hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Lakers.
So, I mean, I threw out one, the lineup I would love to see them try, or at least a version of it, is to put Vanderbilt here. One place I'd start, I might try just putting Vanderbilt in the lineup instead of Reddish, and with the lineup that they had, something close to it last year. Still can move D'Lo to the either keep D'Lo, put Reeves back in. Or I don't mind Taurean Prince as a starter, but short of that, I would just try the lineup that they used last year. If you're looking for a middle ground, then maybe somebody like Max Christie could be in there for Reddish. Put Vanderbilt in the starting lineup. You have Max Christie as somebody who can space the floor a little bit and still provide some of that defensive integrity that you're looking for. Go ahead, send D'Lo to the bench. There are a lot of people in the comment section, because I've been sticking up for D'Lo for a lot of this season, who are like, oh, he's coming up with every excuse. I don't care if D'Angelo Russell starts. I frankly don't care if he plays. I think it's a mistake for the Lakers.
No, I care if he plays. They cannot afford to have D'Angelo Russell.
That's what I'm getting at. If they can figure out a way to make this work within D'Angelo Russell isn't on the team, he's traded, he's not playing. Okay. I just feel like, on this team with what they have, it is going to be different. Like, you need to figure out a way to get him playing well again, rather than just sort of cast him aside. But it has nothing to do with some sort of loyalty to Russell, other than I think he's pretty good, and I find him to be a very interesting player and personality.
Plus your D'Lo back tat.
Right. Well, there is that. I mean,
I mean, that was days worth of inking, a lot of
and
investment.
it was a long time between when they sent him away and when they got him back to wear shirts at the beach. Like I find, like you just don't want that out there. But I don't care about that stuff. But what I want is a lineup that makes some sense, that can put guys in the best positions to succeed and are most likely to work. And this one is not there. So I mean, where would I start? I would start with a lineup that functionally got them to the Western Conference Finals last year, with tweaks here and there, and it's matchup based and whatever. But that's where I would have started.
Yeah, I would say that, again, with the caveat of, if this thing is going to work at all, you do need to give it more time, whether you believe in it or not. If you're going to try it at all and bother trying it, you need to give it longer than 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, if you were looking for a middle ground that achieves or could achieve what Darvin's looking for defensively while making the offense more functional, if nothing else, they need another ball handler. Like the lack of spacing doesn't bother me because we've talked about this before. I don't think this team has a ton of gravity no matter what, but the lack of a second ball handler, that I think actually hurts them more than the spacing.
It makes it hard to run any actions.
Right. Which either way would mean putting Reeves or D'Lo back in that starting lineup. I would put Reeves in because ultimately I think Reeves is, if not an overall better player than D'Angelo Russell at his best, I think he's a better defender than D'Lo. To make it clear, I don't think either are great, but I think he's better. And I would move Reddish to the bench and keep Vanderbilt there, because I think Vanderbilt's best quality, which is point of attack defense, the ability to defend along the perimeter, is most useful against another team's best scoring guards or wings. And in a lot of ways, you don't get the full theoretical benefit of Vanderbilt off the bench. Reddish can do what he does as a starter off the bench. And Reddish should keep playing. I'm not saying take him out of the rotation or anything like that, but you can play Reddish in basically the same role, roughly the same minutes, depending on how things shake out from the bench, with, I think, more or less the same benefits. I think the benefits you get from Vanderbilt reduced drastically if he's playing.
And Reddish is more likely to be less negative offensively against reserves as opposed to starters.
There's probably
still
some
not going to
truth
be a positive. Vanderbilt's not going to be a positive against either group, so you might as well just let him play. Let him, as he did last year, have those moments where he can really take advantage of the fact that literally nobody.
And Prince, you need to keep starting, because if you want as many minutes for him with LeBron and AD, because if you are trying to space the floor for them at all, you have to have the closest thing you have to a volume shooter on this team out there. So the way he's shooting right now, Prince has to start.
Before we go, the biggest thing that has been, I think, is sort of a side conversation aside from the starting lineup on Lakers social media over the last few days is Jaime Jaquez, who went to UCLA, very familiar to LA fans, but 4 years there. And was taken by the Heat one spot after the Lakers took Jalen Hood-Schifino, is playing extremely well with the Heat. He's being given a lot of opportunities to play because the Miami's got a bunch of injuries. Jimmy Butler's been in and out of the lineup, among other players. Bam Adebayo's missed a bunch of time. They've had a ton of injuries. They continue to win games because of the Heat. And one reason, though, is Jaquez has played really well as a rookie, stepping in and showing he is extraordinarily ready to contribute. Jalen Hood-Schifino, who could turn out to be an excellent player, obviously has not contributed. He's been hurt, and even when he wasn't hurt, it was pretty clear he's not ready yet to be a rotation player on a team.
Which you would expect from a one-and-done player.
One-and-done point guard, particularly.
Yeah.
So it's really lit up a conversation about whether or not the Lakers screwed up the pick. And it's an interesting question.
I think a lot of it just has to do with, you mentioned before, philosophically. It's way too early to say that Hood-Schifino is a bust. It's way too early to say that Jaime Jaquez is going to be a better pro than Jalen Hood-Schifino. I mean, that's just way too reactionary. there isn't nearly the same sample size. Hood-Schifino is much younger than Jaquez, all of that stuff. But where I think this question is fair is when you think about where the Lakers are right now, trying to squeeze every last bit of mileage out of the LeBron era. They're in extreme win now mode. And whether or not you think Jaquez would have the exact same role or opportunity on this team as he's had in Miami, which should be noted, they are also in very win now mode as well. They're always in win now mode. It was obvious that Jaquez would be readier than Hood-Schifino is.
Yeah, a guy who plays 4 years in college, generally speaking, is going to be more ready to play, more prepared to play. I mean, look at Colin Castleton.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing, and Jaquez is just a better player.
Right. I mean, so it's fair to question whether or not the Lakers were potentially getting either too cute by half or even too greedy by half, wanting, very understandably, to try to stockpile a little more youth on this team and try to get some youth with the pedigree and the rare mid-first round pick that they don't have all that often, trying to look beyond this period with LeBron and AD. It is an understandable impulse, but you could argue that from a practical, pragmatic standpoint, they should have been seeking out somebody like Jaquez.
The other thing that I think people are forgetting is the guy who was taken right after Jaquez, if the Lakers wanted a guard, was Pajemski, or however his name is pronounced. I think it's Pajemski, with Golden State. And so, he has been kind of pressed into action as well. He's also played very well, starting for him right now. I think the answer is probably they thought that anybody they picked in that spot probably wouldn't be able to contribute given the type of roster that they expected to put together. And there probably is some truth to that. If everybody is healthy, I think it is reasonable for them to assume that, anybody, even some guys are more ready than others, but to expect a, 19, is that where is it 18 or 19? I forget. 19. The Lakers draft Hood-Schifino at 17. Anybody in that sort of 17 and beyond, even somebody like Cam Whitmore, who was expected to be a lottery pick, has not cracked even a tiny bit Houston's rotation this year. So like the expectation is that if you're drafted at that point, you're just probably not going to play that much. So Jaquez, for example, is the exception to the rule, to how well he's playing.
Well, it depends.
I think it's fair for them to have made that assumption that they're going to fill out this roster with a bunch of players who are going to be ready to go and ready to play. But the thing about it is like when you have LeBron, when you have AD, when you have guys who, have spotty injury histories and stuff like that, there is benefit to having your 13th guy be somebody who can actually step on the floor and play, even if you don't think you're going to have to use them.
That's what I was going to say. Like, whether or not the Lakers thought whoever they would select would actually end up playing is a separate question about whether they'd be ready if you needed them. And what we see in Jaquez reminds me a lot of when you and I covered the kids era for the Lakers, and Larry Nance Jr. as a rookie or Josh Hart as a rookie. You could tell those guys would have been able to contribute on a good team right away. Like whether or not on a good team, as opposed to the one that they were drafted on at the time when the Lakers were rebuilding without trying to rebuild, who knows whether or not they would have had the opportunity. But Larry Nance Jr. as a rookie could have played 12 minutes a game for a good team and not screwed things up. Josh Hart could have played 12 minutes a game for a good team and not screwed things up. And they were 4-year players, and they were players that you could reasonably say, if we have to play them in a game with stakes, you probably don't worry about it too much. And that to me is the difference between Jaquez and Hood-Schifino, even if Hood-Schifino may end up a terrific player down the stretch.
I am, this is one of those things that probably shouldn't have mattered, but may turn out to, and certainly
it may not
having either one of those guys as somebody who could plug into the rotation, particularly I think a guard, in Pajemski, And I'm just not 100% sure I'm saying it right. It
Well,
would just be helpful.
Lakers thought they'd have Gabe Vincent.
Yeah. So right. I mean, there's these. None of these guys are supposed to be able to be part of this. So we understand. I mean, so we'll see how the next incarnation of this rotation goes tonight. And please, I do not want to have to do the show a Thursday night show into Friday where they lose this game to Charlotte. All right, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with 22,000 subscribers and more. We
Plus my
will be
niece.
back. We will be back on Friday, hopefully talking about a Lakers win. See everyone tomorrow.